Another one.
All right. So Don says, when should you use contract testing over UI tests, or are both required? All right. So that is a great question. I will just leave it up there as I answer it. So, um, when you say contract testing, I'm taking it as like more on the API level, business like business logic level, right? Wherever that comes from. But I would say that in the testing pyramid, right? Um, the contract testing, which to me, I think we can like I don't normally use the term contract testing, but I'm going to include that like going from the unit testing, which tests like the code, but also some sort of the business logic, all the way up to I'd go to the API testing, right? Um, and I'd say you use that as much as you can. Like the 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 UI test, those should be very used sparingly. I know, and even I've had to do it in the past where it's like everything depended on the UI test. But it's really because they're so flaky that they'll fail, and you'll be running with like a chicken with your head cut off, trying to fix them every single day. The UI test that you should not be using, you should not be like your main source, right? The testing pyramid goes like starting from unit test, and then your integration component testing, and then your API testing, and then you have your UI test. And so like with a pyramid, right? So it just goes like a lot of like the most tests that you have is going to be your unit test, right? And usually that's from the developers. But interestingly, I had a conversation today in my one-on-one, and I asked my manager like, is there anything here that's holding back QAs from actually writing unit tests and contributing to it? Because if the test coverage is low, and like if you know how to do it, could we just contribute to increasing our test coverage, right? And that way it brings some of the tests closer to the code. The way that I answered it similarly the other day was the closer to the code you are, the more tests that you want, right? Um, and then as you get further and further away from the code, then that's when your tests start to become less and less, because the further you get away, the flakier they're going to get, which like leads to manual testing, where those should be like it's just not going to be that much, right? And it shouldn't be. It is going to be the manual testing like the first time you're actually working on it, but you shouldn't be like testing the same exact thing over and over and over and over again. Like on my team, we have we have the API test, we have the unit test, and there's like 1,200 unit tests for like one of the applications we work on. It's like 1,200 unit tests, uh about 70 API tests. We have some other type of tests that test some other, like it's they're not UI tests, but they use Docker and all that type of stuff, right? And we have about 75 of those. And then we have some UI tests, right? Um, and the UI test that we have is not that much. So I would say try like you have to get as much of the business logic, the API logic, because that's the most important part. So the most important part, you want it to be functional, right? Like you always want to make sure that that's functional. And oh, look at that. You can put the clock, but we're almost done. So you want it to be like you always want to verify the functionality of that, and the business logic is the thing that's most important. Now on the UI, if there's something that is some cosmetic issue, like you don't want that, but it's not as critical as if you can't finish the whole process. Now, you do want to have some end-to-end tests using the UI, because you want to make sure like the most critical flows that the user is able to actually get through, right? So somebody that I'm working closely with to help them ramp up their skills in QA, which they're actually very good, but just keep working on them, coaching them so they can get to that final destination. Um, I I asked them like, all right, so go to this website, major website. and I said like, what are the scenarios that you would automate, or yeah, what are scenarios that you would automate? And then I had them like tell me like, okay, I would do like the users not like checking out as a user that's not logged in, checking out as a user that is logged in, checking out as a new user, and creating an account, making sure you can log in. Those are like the most critical scenarios. I'm like, all right, yeah, exactly, that's perfect. And I would have those automated and those would run daily, just to make sure that that's working. But every single like scenario, it shouldn't be handled by the UI. If every single scenario is handled by the UI, then there is something wrong in the design process. So that's how I see it. Let me know what you think, Don. Let me know what you think, good guy. If you agree, if you would add anything, if you'd remove anything. But that's just how I've worked through it for the past few years. I remember like at one company, when we were building this new application, I had about 1,000 unit tests, or not unit tests, 1,000 API tests that it took about like 10 minutes to run. But they ran like every single so they had the positive scenarios, and they ran like every single negative scenario that I could think of, like through the API, so that we could know like once the UI was connected to it, that it would still return an error. Now it was up to the front end team to make sure that they would properly handle the errors and stuff like that. But that should, if your developers write proper unit tests, right, that should be caught through the unit test, and you shouldn't necessarily have to do UI tests for all of that, right? All right, so we have, Don was talking about API tests. That's what I figured. And good guy says, quite opposite in our company. I would like to hear how it works in your company, good guy. And do you think that your company is doing it the wrong way, or that they like the reason that they're doing it that way is because they can't do it another way? Let me know, and we'll talk about it. All right, and Don says, I love permutation testing, fuzzing at the API layer. Sometimes you can find it really hard to find race condition cases. I write UI tests that will keep the light on for the company. Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. All right, and business. So good guy says business process follows mostly as manual tester would perform, either web, terminal, or mobile emulation. So you're saying that like the process is having a manual tester do most of the work? Let me know. But yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, we'll probably talk about that sometime, because I would love to hear more about how that works. But let's get to a pre question, or a question that I already sourced, and we will get to that. So shout out to Don, shout out to Good Guy for being active in the chat.
If you enjoyed the fascinating information shared in this video and you want more, be sure to hit the subscribe button to Tech Coach Ralph to be notified for new videos. Enigmatic Joker.